1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My guest today is Jimmy Hall. Jimmy is the lead singer, harp player, and saxophone player with Wet Willie and a founding member. And he's also been Hank Williams Jr.'s band leader for a long time and has fronted Jeff Beck's band for a long time. And that's just him that you heard singing the theme song to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. So thanks for being my guest today, Jimmy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. We've talked about doing this, and here we are. So I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks again for doing this theme song for me a little while ago.
It's kind of catchy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I guess it serves its purpose. But we usually, start in the beginning of your life in music, and I was curious. I know you grew up in a musical family, but
Yeah.
what were some of your earliest musical memories?
You know what? These days I think about those kind of things like, what did I hear in my household? And I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and way back then, in the 50s and 60s and whatever. And Mobile was a lot smaller town, and so I'm trying to think. I remember hearing my mother sing around the house, and going to church and hearing the church choir and that kind of thing. But musical memories of gosh, when we first got a TV, and then it's funny because some of the people, my dad was a big music fan. Now my mother was more the musical one, and she played piano and in church, and sang and led the children's choir anyway, in church. But my dad was more, he was a big fan of music, and he liked to collect music and collect albums and singles. And I would look back at some of these 45s that we had in our house and going, well, I didn't buy them. I was like 7, 8 years old when they were there. So it was Dad, and he just loved music. So, and all styles. It was everything from rockabilly to jazz and blues and country. And what I was thinking about on TV was in my family, we had 6 kids. I was second of 6. My older brother, Jack, 2 years older. My sister, Donna, is 3 years younger. And then they just stair steps down, 3 sisters and then a younger brother after that. But this was back, probably before my youngest brother was born. But Dad said, okay, I want everybody get around the TV. Everybody sit here and be real quiet, because you got to see this. This is going to be good. And he was so excited. I remember it. And it was Elvis. I think it was Ed Sullivan. And people can correct me on this, because he wore, I just remember gold. He had some gold coat or something on. And God, my dad was just like, I was watching him, because I was going, my dad is so excited about this. He's like, yeah, check this out. You got to look at this. And we were watching this guy singing like a black guy and gyrating and moving around. Of course, I think on that show they didn't really show below his hips. It was a little too wild for us back then. But that was a musical memory from my dad's side. And Ed Sullivan became a show we always watched, and later saw the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and a lot of other good groups. But I try to remember when I first realized I could sing or that I had talent. And I just remember my mom and my dad saw it early on and encouraged me to do it. And anywhere that I could, my brother and I just sat around the house singing a lot of times. And as we got older, my older brother, he had his own guitar. He got an acoustic guitar, and learned how to play it. And we would sing harmony, or he would sing harmony with me, or I would sing harmony with him. Just two parts like that. Just old. We got all these song books, just folk songs, country songs, pop tunes, whatever you could play on guitar. And growing up, I was in some of the school productions. This was a small public school, 2 blocks or so from our house, Mertz School, and they would have programs like the parents helped do it, but it was a little fashion show, and so they wanted some of the students to sing. So me and this girl I was kind of sweet on, Susan Rouillet, we sang "Singing in the Rain," and we had to do little dance steps, and we wore little raincoats, singing in the rain, and a little tap dance. I think that was about 3rd grade or so, and then we would have a play every year or a musical, and they did Hansel and Gretel, and I was just one of the Sandmen or something that put them to sleep. And then I got my big part in the 5th grade. We did HMS Pinafore. It's a Gilbert and Sullivan musical about the English Navy, and it's kind of a comedy. And I played Ralph Rackstraw, the lead, the guy that gets the girl in the end, really. And we got to wear all these British Navy uniforms that had a straw hat, and it had a little stripe top of the shirt, and one of those kind of bib part of the white Navy shirt. Anyway, and I really enjoyed it. I found that the singing was fun. That part came easy. The acting wasn't that hard. I mean, we really rehearsed a lot, and I practiced all that at home. And I just remember the night of the production when we did it, that I was so excited, and I had fun, and people were applauding, and people were enjoying it. And it was an epiphany to me. It was like, I can do this. I like doing this. Maybe I'll do this when I grow up. Maybe this is something I can do, because I wasn't much of an athlete. I was tall and rangy and skinny, and I like baseball. I played some football, but I was just too thin to make any difference. I didn't have a lot of aptitude, we just did it for fun. We played baseball for fun. Some of my friends were on little league teams and more competitive, but music, that came a lot easier. And so that was 5th grade. In the 6th grade, I took violin lessons, and I had a string teacher that would come once a week to teach mostly 6th grade students and violin. And I had a pretty good ear, since I was already trying to sing and could kind of pick out a melody, but I had a pretty good ear. So you have to, of course, the violin has no frets, so you have to keep it right in tune and know where the notes are. But it was rudimentary, basically learning the simple little Reuben, I've been thinking, or these 3-note melodies. The 6th grade violin, I was Even my teacher in the 6th grade was a big classical music fan or whatever, and she took me and some of the other students that wanted to she talked to our parents and said, I want to take Jimmy and some of the other students to the symphony. And she'd take us down to the symphony concert. And I mean, sometimes I fell asleep, but sometimes I was like, oh, I like the bassoon. Oh, I like the oboe sound or whatever. I learned a lot about the classical stuff even then. But so that was 6th grade. In the 7th grade, all of a sudden they said, well, you can take strings or you can be in the band. And in the band, you could have this instrument. And my parents, especially my mom, said, oh, they like the violin all right. They thought it was kind of nerdy. I know my dad did. He didn't say, well, you maybe play the fiddle. But somehow they said, well, they look at your mouth or kind of what your natural sort of the embouchure you have to make or whatever, and said saxophone would probably be good for me, or clarinet. My brother chose clarinet. He was 2 years ahead of me already in the band, so he chose clarinet. And my mom said, I love the saxophone. I've always loved the saxophone. Why don't you do that? So she encouraged me. And then my parents bought me my first alto sax. And I wish I still had it, but it has a sad ending, the story, because it was a beautiful Mark VI, which is the best. Most sax players want to get a Mark VI alto or tenor. And this one was, it was in pretty good shape. It had a big dent in it that we fixed, but it was in good shape. And I remember my parents paid $300 for it, and that was like, these days, that's a steal. But my dad said, you better take good care of it, because this thing, I could have bought a used car for that. I could have bought you a car later on. Anyway, that was my first horn, and I kept it for a good while, but later on I kind of grew out of the alto and went to tenor.
Yeah, and then you also told me that story that you ended up with a harp for your brother.
Yeah, so I played, like I said, played alto in the marching band all the way through junior high and high school. But later on, listening to all the rock and roll on the radio, and even by the time I was about 15, 16, I had my first bands, little 5-piece group that we put together. My brother had his own groups, and they were already getting out playing concerts and stuff with people. But my birthday I turned 16, and my brother and I think his girlfriend Sandy helped him too. They brought me this present and were so excited and said, I want to see you open it, on my birthday. And I opened it, and it was a harmonica. And I'd been talking to my brother, that I'd like to try to learn how to play it, because I heard Mick Jagger. Well, I assumed it was Mick Jagger, but maybe
Brian Jones played it.
Brian Jones played it some. So it could have been him on Little Red Rooster. It was on one of their first albums, like Rolling Stones Now. Could have been on that album. And so I open up the present, and it's a harmonica, but it's a chromatic harmonica, which he paid a lot more money for. He wanted to get me what he would say, I want to get you the best one I could. And I couldn't make any sense out of it, because it has the little button. If you've ever seen them, they have a chromatic button where you go up a step if you push the button. And that was a little bit too much for me to start with. So I said, listen, go and return this. I didn't think about maybe years later I want to play the same thing, which I did, but I said, just go return it, get your money, and save some of it, and get me one, or if you want to, get me a two of the 10 hole, the smaller ones. I said, that's probably what Mick Jagger's playing anyway. So he did, and I practiced, and really, with no one to instruct me, I didn't know a harmonica player anywhere around my circle, and later on ran into a couple guys that played it. So for me, it was listening to records, trying to emulate what I heard, and all I could get out of the harmonica was like, just like a 4-year-old. You just it sounds like folk music. It sounds like, Bob Dylan or whatever. He's just kind of huffing and puffing on it. And so later on, I got a few tips from some friends and people that I ran into and learned, this is cross harp. It's a fourth away from the tonic, and you inhale to get the tonic note, and you inhale to get the blues sound. I still play harmonica today.
Yeah, and pretty mean harmonica too.
Now I think I can play what I would say, what I was aspiring to back then, and just people that I listened to. Little Walter Jacobs, a Chicago player, played with Muddy Waters, and had solo records, and Junior Wells, who played and was kind of a sidekick to Buddy Guy, and James Cotton. Some of these people I got to see live. I saw James Cotton in like 1968 at a pop festival, and really started listening to him. And later on, Wet Willie toured, and we opened up for him, and he borrowed one of my harps. He said, I blew out my A harp. Can I borrow yours? I just gave it to him.
Yeah. So you just mentioned some of your influences on the harp. Who were some of the influences on your singing?
Oh boy. Well, I'm thinking way back, and some of the guys that like Sam Cooke. I was always into people that could, mostly males, that could just really, that had a good range, and were pretty soulful. But Sam Cooke was one of my favorites. And Ray Charles, my dad bought the album Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music, and I thought that was just amazing, because I'd heard country music, and then just to hear a black person sing it just made sense to me that the songs were chosen so perfectly for Ray. They were just he just put a lot of soul in it. It just worked. I loved Otis Redding. Otis had a lot of hits back in those years and when I was growing up. And of course it was AM radio, and they played everything. AM played country and pop and soul, and they played was it Slim Harpo, Scratch My Back, or Jimmy Reed. Those all had top 40 hits that got on the AM radio. James Brown, from the very start, really moved me and inspired me. Some of the first times I saw him was on some of those Dick Clark shows. It seemed like Where the Action Is came on in the afternoon, or Bandstand, and I'd see James on there. And 1965 or so, it was 1965, a friend of mine, I'm still friends with him too. It's so wild to think about how we started. Even in grammar school, we're in same classes a lot. But in high school, he came to me and he said, "What are you doing Friday night?" And I said, "Not much. What's going on?" He said, "I want you to go with me. I got tickets to this concert." And I said, "Okay, who's playing, or who is it?" And he said, "James Brown." And I said, "Oh man, really? That's gonna be fun. That's gonna be." I loved, the first songs, even Try Me, and then Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, and all the hits later on. But it was at Mobile Municipal Auditorium, and that was still is probably the biggest venue in Mobile. And I was a little bit apprehensive, but I'll say this. It was only because I grew up in the South, and I was anxious about being one of the few white people in a concert like that. But my friend Walter said, man, you're going to love it because everybody's there for the music. It's not going to be any problem. We're not going to get, picked on or discriminated against for being the few white ones there. So we went to the show, and really I could see maybe 5 or 10 of us there, but everybody was so excited. And, like I say, James was just getting started, and it was a packed house. And the opening act, of course, okay, it was the Famous Flames featuring Bobby Byrd, and they backed up some of the opening act, and the opening act for James that night was TV Mama. And it's funny because I saw a poster of one of those shows at a show I was at that I was playing in Orlando just a few months ago, and it was James Brown opening act, TV Mama. And TV Mama was not that well known, but it's kind of that black vaudeville, kind of a comedy act. Yeah. She could sing, but she was really, really overweight, like 350 pounds. And she sang funny songs that made kind of self-deprecating songs about, all of me, take all of me, any weeny bit, teeny weeny bit of my love, and all this. And while she was singing, Bobby Byrd was walking around, clowning around behind her, doing things like he had a tape measure and he was measuring her bottom or just her width and making all these funny faces, and people were cracking up. So that was kind of the kickoff. But James came out, and girls were screaming like it was the Beatles, and James just was electric and mesmerizing and was such an entertainer. I mean, at certain points he just went back and, before he started doing his hits, he went back and played the organ on some songs, and he's a great keyboard player. And then he came out and did all of his Papa's Got a Brand New Bag and Try Me and Night Train, and did the skate, or his version of the skate or the mashed potato, but it's where he skated across stage. And as soon as he did it, it was like I had to hold my ears. They're screaming so loud. And he also, as he worked up a sweat and got hot, up there, he started undoing his bow tie. He was dressed up in, it's kind of a, that shorter, I call it like a matador look, because it had a shorter waist, higher waist, tux kind of coat with a bow tie or a continental tie, and cufflinks. So he would untie the tie, and it would be kind of hanging down. Then maybe he would throw that out to somebody, and then the cufflinks would come off, and he'd throw those out. And pretty soon he had the coat off, and he's getting down to business. But yeah.
So you got a lesson in performing and entertaining too.
Soul performance, dropping down on or doing the split. He was doing that and doing the spins, and just amazing what he could do.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, I guess, when you were still in school,
yeah,
you had your band. So did Jack.
Yeah.
What made the two of you join forces?
Well, in the very beginning, like I say, Jack's 2 years older, and he has a musical gift just like a lot of my family. He, of course, he played clarinet, and you know, we in the band, in the school band, learned how to read music and whatever. So I had appreciation, or just to know the basics. But I can't remember when my dad bought this guitar, and we still have it at our house where Mom still lives. We in our collection of stuff, or you know, kind of the Hall Museum. This original, I can never remember the brand because it's, you know, like a Harmony, or you know, one of the Sears ones. But acoustic guitar, and Jack taught himself how to play it, and you know, how to kind of read the chord charts and everything. And then got in his first band. I'm trying to remember if he had a band before this, but the one that really got some notoriety around town was called the Vibrations, and they had the guy playing like rhythm guitar, or playing some lead, Rob McConnell. He was a real kind of business guy, and he helped kind of form that band and pick out the players. But they would play all kinds of little teen clubs, but their big chance was they opened for Eric Burden and the Animals at a concert at the auditorium, and Jack and his band wore these Beatle suits. They found them at, I don't know, like what store in town would have something like that, but it was like you could buy Beatle suits with no lapel on them. And anyway, that was cool. But I'd be hanging when Jack and his band would rehearse. The Vibrations is what they call it. I'd be sitting around listening, observing, whatever. And every once in a while, I would the subject of like, what does Jimmy do? Is he got any talent? And Jack would say, oh yeah, he's a good singer. He's a good singer. And he would go, why don't you get up and sing one? And so I got up and would sing something like High Heel Sneakers, or you know, an Elvis song or something, and just kind of show that I got, you know, I'm interested in this kind of stuff. But you know, he had his band, he was doing his thing. Then I started mine with some friends of mine and some of my classmates in school. Some of the guys were in the high school band with me. And the first band that I put together was called the Squires. It's Squires. And just like all, if you had a band back then, you went and bought the uniforms or clothes that look alike. You know, he said, we got to have a look. You know, we started out with some kind of little denim caps. They were kind of Carnaby Street, kind of mod or something. We wore denim caps and then matching shirts and something like that. But really, to cut to the chase about Jack and I, we had separate bands, and then that band that I started, we were making headway in the local scene and playing around town, and Jack, for some reason, his group, you know, people, they graduate school or college or what, you know, graduate high school and move on, and some of his guys had moved out of town, and he was in between bands at that time, and he said, well, I can play bass for your band. Why don't I do that? Because I wasn't really happy with our bass player. He was like a lot of the guys in my band. They were all members of the high school band, and this guy played trombone, and he just wasn't serious about playing bass. I mean, he wanted to be in the band, but just to be cool or whatever he thought. And he was always kind of like showing up late and gone. Didn't want to rehearse. So we hired Jack, and then, and you know, we played. It was like there was a teen club in town, which is a rare thing now, but all for under 21. Serves no alcohol, and they have a lot of adult supervision. But all the teen bands played in this little club, and it was only open on Friday and Saturday nights, probably like 7 to 10, and like I say, very much chaperoned or adult supervision. It was a lot of fun though. And so yeah, that journey, that path led to Jack and I putting these bands together, working together, and handpicking the better players in town, trying to make, just think about what's the best lineup we could have out of little bitty Mobile, Alabama, you know.
What was the name of that iteration of the band?
I went through so many names. And personnel changes. We had some crazy names. We were called Carl LaFong for about a year or less, because we were living in Fairhope outside of Mobile in a rented house, and it was a W.C. Fields comedy album that had this character that he was playing, that W.C. Fields was playing, called Carl LaFong, and so we named it Carl LaFong. But the name that people probably have heard before, maybe if they read a bio about Wet Willie, was Fox, the Fox. And we were called Fox for about a year before we got signed and became Wet Willie in 1970.
So around the same time you guys moved to Macon, Georgia, what made you guys move? Was that Capricorn Records, or what was your connection there?
Well, the way that all worked is it was precipitated by, or the idea that we're just trying to look ahead, and we didn't see much going on in Mobile, Alabama for anybody in music. There wasn't a record label there. There were some little studios. We found studios. In fact, one of them, there's a guy named Milton Brown.
Yeah, he was also involved with early Jimmy Buffett.
Right. And so that, we knew about Milton and his studio in Mobile. And we used to go and hang out there. I mean, we just made connections because, like, this is what's going on in this town. This is the only studio somebody's, showing any promise of having any kind of hits come out of there. But there was a period where our little band with me and Jack and the Fox were doing demos for Milton and another co-writer, a guy named Jim Ed. I can't remember what his name was. Anyway, yeah, the other guy, he was a guy that was a TV newsman, but they wrote songs together, and they were some of them were really pretty bad country, trying to be country songs, and it's so funny. I wish we had somebody's got the tapes of those things, but one of the titles I remember was called Sugar Free Woman. There's nothing sweet about you. Saccharine kisses. Oh God, it was just really
So did you end up singing those demos?
Yeah. I mean, they were I don't think they were really paying us much to do this, but it was like if they wrote a song and said, okay, can you guys, here's the lyrics and here's kind of how it goes. So we were trying to get our feet wet as far as recording and learning how to do it. So we would do these songs, and every once in a while there was one that was almost like we're the youth, we're the future generation. It's like, We're the future generation, and we're gonna run this nation when you're dead. In spite of what's said. And these are older guys writing this for the youth, or thinking about, hey, what would be the all these new hippies or whatever that are around. What do they want to say? So they were trying to write that. But every once in a while, Jimmy Buffett was in there recording some of his early songs and just getting his experience, getting his feet wet with what he later ended up here in Nashville and
he cut here
and
too.
working with Norbert, and then there I was working with Norbert Putnam right after that.
Yeah. So at that time, did you already dabble in songwriting at all, or did that start later?
Just the very beginning of dabbling, really. I was writing lyrics and poetry and things like that, and I think I was just unsure of what I was capable of, and so I didn't push it that much until like the first Wet Willie album. I don't think I had any songs on, and maybe co-wrote one or two with Ricky Hirsch on the second, and on into the second and third albums. But it's just something you got to keep trying, and it'll get better. You just get better at it. Somebody say, no, try this. Why don't you? It's just something that you have to work on and learn from those right ahead of you. We were talking about what led us to Capricorn Records. We were in there for a while. We were in college, and this was 1969 into 1970, and the draft was breathing down our necks, and the lottery came around. They voted to have the lottery system for the draft, and my brother and I both got high numbers, and I think that's very fortunate with all that was going on in Vietnam, and we were avidly listening to a lot of music on the radio, and what we could hear, or we were buying albums. We were buying albums and listening to them nonstop, just trying to learn. So one of the albums we bought and that was around a lot was the Allman Brothers' first album on Capricorn Records, and I always liked the blues, and I noticed there was some blues on there, yet more versions of the blues that had great guitar work and good arrangements, and I heard Greg's voice, and it just, to me, it was like that voice of Greg Allman was just so amazing, and it was so much more soulful and bigger than somebody that I thought, well, he couldn't be that much older than me, but a white guy singing like that, it just said, I'm white, I like singing like that, I can do something like whatever. He was one or two steps ahead of me. The Allman Brothers were ahead of Wet Willie, but it's kind of made us believe that we could do our own record, and why shouldn't we go to Macon, Georgia, and see if we could get on that label. And there was a connection between Ricky Hirsch, who's our guitar player, and a guy named Frank Friedman. And Frank was a guitar player, songwriter, kind of in the stable of Capricorn and the players and writers there. And Ricky knew him through, they went to the University of Alabama together. They were fraternity brothers. And Ricky said, well, I'll call my friend. He's up there in Macon, and see if he could open the door for us, or he could make something happen. So Frank said, well, I talked to the label people. I talked to Phil Walden and Frank Fenner, and they want you guys to come up here and audition. So we packed up our van and headed to Macon. And when we got there, I think we were staying with some friends at first, and then the audition came, and we set up our equipment. In Capricorn, the guys, the label had a warehouse. It was basically just a warehouse, but it was also a place to rehearse, and they wanted me to audition there, wanted our band to play. So we set up our equipment, played like a, I don't know, 45-minute set. We played, some of our best stuff. Some of it was original. And they loved it. They just said, we hear a lot of promise in this, and we think this is like the American Rolling Stones. And they agree. They wanted us to sign, and we did. And things started moving pretty fast, and we started working on our first album in their studio, which was kind of rudimentary. I can't remember if it was 8-track even then, but they provided that studio for us. And once we got and our producer was Eddie Offord, who also produced the second album, and he was chosen by Frank Fender and Phil, but Frank, because Frank had he had been working for Atlantic Records before that, and Eddie was producing Yes, the band Yes, which is so different than Wet Willie ever could be. I mean, as far away as you could be from us, stylistically. But Eddie was great. I mean, he had a lot of good ideas, and he let us kind of play our own way, and he just got it down on tape,
Was Jim Hawkins involved with those early recordings too, or did he just do the demos with you guys?
Yeah, he was there, and he was engineering, and he was a big part of it. In fact, we might have slept on his floor or in his couch or whatever in the very beginning. Just he was just more than just being an engineer, and he was a friend and still is.
Yeah, one thing too, it's like, and I guess that's mainly your association with Capricorn Records. You get lumped into the Southern rock thing when Wet Willie was more of a rhythm and blues band to me.
Yeah.
Is that something that connection that you actually embraced and, that helped you guys out, or was it more of a distraction or something of a mislabeling?
Just the fact that we were lumped into Southern rock style or genre, whatever. We didn't fight against it really at all, just because it was popular, and some people, that's just what they were going to call us. If we toured with the Almonds and then with Skinner or with Marshall Tucker, it was it didn't hurt us. But we did pretty much, it was like, damn the torpedoes. We like the soul and the funk, and we were surrounded by it in Macon. It was a soul town. It was where Otis Redding grew up, and Little Richard came up through there,
and Phil Walden had that.
And Phil Walden had that history with all these artists, and had his label and his management company. Arthur Connolly, maybe. I'm trying to think of some of them that he worked with, but they were all soul artists, and that was just a town that was the majority was majority black, and so there was a lot of it on the radio and kind of out there on the street, and we soaked it up, and it was the early 70s, and God, we just like, Soul Jones and Soul Sister and Countryside of Life, and later on Baby Fat, and we were just, Red Hot Chicken. It's just funky soul music with some blues in there, you know.
And you always found songs too that you guys made your own, like Shout Bama Lama, Lady Great St. Groceries.
Exactly. I didn't know about Shout Bama Lama until I think Phil played it for us, but that song, it's just I don't know, it's a little bit more like Little Richard in a way.
Yeah.
Just one of those hard driving, rocking soul songs, and it's still fun to do that. And we also cut a Little Richard song on that second album called "You Keep a Knockin', But You Can't Come In," and doing Grits and doing Little Milton's version, was a lot of fun and became a trademark,
Yeah. When did your sister Donna join you guys singing harmonies?
I don't remember them or the Williettes being there singing until the Keep On Smilin' album that Tom Dowd produced. Before that, I think they did a few overdubs, and I think my sister maybe did a few of those, but they were really featured a lot on the fourth album, Keep On Smilin'. It came out in 1974, and then the next one was Dixie Rock, and that was both of those produced by Tom Dowd. Mm-hmm. And he really helped form that sound with the girls. He loved that and featured them a lot.
Yeah. Was Donna still in Mobile at the very beginning when you guys moved to Macon, or did she make the move with you guys?
In the beginning, she was, and she would come to visit. She was 3 years younger than me, so she was getting out of high school by the time we were in Macon for a couple, 3 years, and coming to visit. And then initially she got a job working at the label. She came up in the summer, I believe, and then got offered a job to work at the label. So she had some work besides just singing. But then once she was there, she became a background singer hired by the studio, and she sang on, I think she sang on some Marshall Tucker stuff. I know she sang on Kitty Wells, which to me was like, boy, that was a big deal, because Kitty Wells was just one of the really big female stars of country music back then. But she sang on some cool stuff.
Yeah.
On the Cowboy, I think she sang on some Cowboy stuff.
Yeah, and some of Cowboy were also the band on that Kitty Wells.
Oh, that's right.
Record.
Yeah, that's really wild to think about.
And obviously there's a lot more we got to talk about. We have barely made it to the start of your recording career.
Yeah.
And we're also already towards the end of our first hour, so I appreciate you, Rob, to come back and kind of keep the story going up till now, because there's so much more interesting stuff just ahead. We haven't even mentioned Jeff Beck or any of you guys' hits.
Yeah,
because Wet Willie.
It would segue really well when we start again to we covered the first couple albums, and then I talked about the Williettes. So right in that juncture is where we first met Jeff Beck and went on tour with him. So that's a great place to start.
Yeah, we'll get to all that. Would you mind taking us out with a tune of some sort?
A tune of some sort. Let's see. This was on our first album. a little Jimmy Reed called Shame, Shame, Shame. Tried to tell you, baby, you really didn't make no sense. Now you got me, baby, up against your fence. Don't you know it's a shame? Shame. Baby, don't you know shame the way you do? Shame, shame, shame. Baby, don't you know it's a shame on you?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jimmy, for being my guest today, and we'll resume that as soon as we can, and then we'll take it up to the here and now.
All right, then.
We'll resume our conversation in the next episode, where we'll cover Jimmy's success with Wet Willie, as well as his solo years, his collaboration with Jeff Beck, and much more. This was the 24th episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. We taped it at Creative Workshop Recording Studio in Nashville. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Until next week.